Are we live? We are live, and welcome to Uphold, Jesse. You're gonna have to do more of the talking because, as you heard, I've got major hiccups.
Happy to, Martin. Thank you so much for having me. And again, I think we should just get somebody to come in and scare them out of you.
I'm waiting for somebody to scare me, but I'm all alone. So, let's talk about you. Let's talk about Energy Web. How did you get this started? What's the background, and what is Energy Web? Without me talking too much.
Definitely. So again, thanks for having us. And I think just to zoom back to about 2017, when Energy Web started, myself and several other individuals from an organization I used to work at called RMI. It's a US-based think tank focused on the energy transition. And when I say energy transition, that means this transition of basically fundamentally transforming the way that the economy runs by getting all of our energy from renewables instead of where we get it from now, which is fossil fuel-based power plants. And back in 2017, a bunch of us got tired, speaking frankly, of doing, I don't know, white papers, research, consulting, workshops to basically help different stakeholders figure out what it was going to take to fully decarbonize our energy systems. And instead, a number of us launched this organization called Energy Web Foundation. And what we do is we actually build digital tools to help some of the world's largest energy companies take action on decarbonization instead of
But you're a
just sitting in
non-profit.
boardrooms.
You're a
That's
non-profit
right.
organization.
So we
Okay.
structured Energy Web as a nonprofit because, as I was saying, we are focused on the energy transition. Our entire mission is about working with some of the world's biggest energy companies to help accelerate progress on decarbonizing the way that we run the global economy. And we're structured as a nonprofit. That's right.
So, how does this fit in with tokenization? Why do you need a token? Why do you need blockchain for that?
Totally. So back in 2017, the idea was this, and we've really transitioned quite a bit since then. And there's even a brand new token model that is coming out very soon that I'm sure we'll talk about in this session. But the way we started was we said, okay, all of you energy companies that have hopped on the Energy Web bandwagon, what is this blockchain thing useful for? That was kind of the first question. And so in the early days, we did a lot of different rapid prototyping, constructed a lot of prototypes, proof of concepts to help these different energy companies experiment with different ways that tokenization, blockchain, and crypto could create value for them. And I like to say we found 200 ways to not use blockchain and not use crypto, and a couple of ways that make really good business sense for these companies to use blockchain and crypto.
So,
And so that's what we're focused on now.
what is the business sense? Why does it need to be blockchain?
So I would say, zoom out from blockchain for a minute and talk about Web3 a little bit more generally, because we use a lot of different Web3 technologies and architectures, including blockchain. And if it's okay, Martin, to really answer that question, can I describe for a minute kind of the fundamental problem that we're
Go ahead.
solving? Because I think it'll actually make it easier for the audience to understand why we're using all this Web3 stuff. So now we moved on from doing all this, prototyping and proof of concepts because we figured out two very specific problems where Web3 technology is very well suited to creating value for these companies. And it doesn't have to do with the metaverse. It doesn't have to do with NFTs, right? So the first problem, just think about the world today. There are millions of electric vehicles sitting out there today. There are millions of batteries sitting in people's basements in different places around the world. There are lots of heat pumps that people use to power to basically heat or cool their buildings. All of those assets basically are just kind of sitting there, either warming our buildings, making it so that we can drive around, or storing electricity to be used at some time, right? Those are batteries. That's a huge, huge missed opportunity because all of those assets that are just sitting there, if we network them together, utilities, so the electric utilities that keep the lights on, they can actually use those assets that are distributed. They're naturally decentralized. They're
So I
owned by
get
lots of different people and
control over
businesses.
my assets.
You get control over your assets, but even better, your utility that you pay electricity bills to will pay you for that thing to use or not use electricity at certain times a day in order to balance the grid. So that's a transformative concept. So networking together millions of these different assets and using them to balance the grid instead of basically big thermal power plants. Yeah. So that setup, right? If you're a utility and you look at that, you say, oh my God, this is a completely different way of managing the grid. because normally you're basically sitting in a room turning up and down big thermal power plants to balance it. So that's the challenge we're focused on solving. Now, where does Web3 come in? Where does crypto come in? Basically, all of those different assets are owned by different people, by different organizations. It's naturally decentralized and distributed, right? There's no one entity controlling all of those millions of different assets. Naturally, that's a good fit for Web3 tech. So basically, all of those different assets, all of those different people, all of those different organizations, they need to be able to exchange data in very close to real time in order for what I'm describing to take place, in order for all of these assets to basically store electricity, generate electricity, or use it at very precise time intervals. Do you want all of that data flowing through a centralized kind of actor who then command and control tells every asset what to do? No. So what we do is we use a decentralized architecture for all of those different assets to exchange data, for messages to be sent between them. And that's where we use blockchain, self-sovereign digital identity, and even
But
tokens to
we
pull
had
that
this
off.
before. You could, like 20 years ago, you could run your solar panels, and the electricity company would pay you for the amount of energy you put back in the net.
Totally.
How is
And that happens.
blockchain changing this?
Yeah. So there are different schemes all around the world, feed-in tariffs in Austria where you're sitting. I'm sitting in California. There's something called net energy metering, which means exactly that. If I have a solar system, it spins the other way and puts energy into the grid. They pay me a little bit. But let me tell you this, Martin, do you think your utility actually, do you have solar on your house by chance?
I do, yes.
You do? Okay. So I would bet a lot of money that your utility actually cannot
Is not
digitally
paying me
interact.
enough.
Well, they're
And
probably not paying you enough, but also just stick on the tech for a second. They probably can't even interact with your system. Like, do they have a way to basically communicate with the inverter on your house to tell that inverter to shut off? No. So some of
no.
these fundamental operational capabilities that for people that kind of like myself who grew up with an iPhone in their hand, it's crazy that utilities don't have these kind of fundamental digital capabilities. So even though there might be basic ways to pay you and I for the solar on our roof, there exists no functionality for utilities to communicate with those assets and get them to do very specific things at very precise times. And if we can get them to do that, those services that you and I, as these asset owners, they're very worthwhile. So those are actually more valuable services, but these utilities do not have the ability to do that right now because they don't have the digital infrastructure that's needed to pull it off.
So how do you convince them to use that? I mean,
so we don't.
It sounds like you're mostly
Yes.
talking to utilities. It's easy to convince somebody with a solar panel on the roof, but how do you talk to utilities about this?
Our customers as Energy Web are those businesses. So we're not on a day-to-day basis talking to folks like us on this line who happen to have solar on our roofs. Our go-to-market, our path to creating success and impact and widespread adoption of Energy Web and by extension Energy Web token is by getting these businesses to adopt our solutions. And the way we approach them, I know there's a lot of folks on this line that are much more from the crypto community, right? We don't talk about blockchain.
Sorry, there's a question here. Why would I want the utility company to have control of my system?
They don't necessarily have control over it. Most of the systems that we deploy is they can expose a price to your solar system or your battery so that you or a business that does it on behalf of you would choose to do something with your asset and get paid for that service. So in most cases, utilities aren't directly controlling anything. They're sending a very specific price signal to your house and your asset to do something at a specific moment in time. So it's your choice.
Yep. Okay, so what does the EWT token do?
Yeah. So in order to pull off, this is a pretty complicated kind of solution I'm describing here, right? So something that enables hundreds of different businesses in a given area to exchange data, to expose these specific price signals, and at the end of the day, actually have all these assets being used to balance the grid. One of the key pieces of technology that is used to pull all of this off is something we just open sourced called these worker nodes. Yep. And what these worker nodes do is they basically pseudonymize all of that data and make sure the right data is going to the right players. So these are different nodes that are running a very specific protocol to make this solution work. In our world, if you want to run one of those nodes, and this is what's being released this year, you have to stake Energy Web tokens to run one of those nodes, and then those nodes are performing that work to make sure the whole solution runs. So that's the primary use case that we're working on right now
So
for the
what
Energy
it
Web token.
is a data interchange.
Yeah, we actually call it, this solution, a data exchange. And the way the data exchange works is there are nodes, and those nodes are basically routing the data to the correct participants. If you want to be trusted to run one of those nodes, you've got to stake Energy Web tokens. Yep. So that's the architecture that we're bringing to life.
But I still maintain control over what I have, right? I
Absolutely.
can sell it. I can. No, there's just some questions here. So someone other than you can turn your heat off.
Yeah, let's look at them.
It's not the case, right? Are you seeing the question?
No.
Nobody can turn off.
Yeah,
your
I can
heat.
see them now.
Yeah.
No. So let's again, and we can talk about the worker nodes. And I should also mention that we are using other Web3 technologies besides these worker nodes. So every transaction I'm talking about here is currently running on the Energy Web chain, and you have to use Energy Web tokens to pay the transaction fees and for other services on the Energy Web stack. So that's kind of table stakes. That's very similar to basically every other crypto project that claims to be working with enterprises. What we're doing with these worker nodes is creating an environment where any Energy Web token holder can stake their tokens, run one of these nodes, and then they're providing a service to an enterprise that's paying for it. There's no other crypto projects that really do that. And so that's what we're really focused on with the token economics. Looking at some of the questions, just to be really clear, I'm trying to give a really specific example. I'm in California. What the future is going to look like is I happen to be a pretty good example because my wife and I have a heat pump, we have a battery, we have an electric vehicle and a solar system. All of those assets can be used to actually balance the grid. And that means it's valuable for utility to pay me to do that. That doesn't really exist in too many places right now.
Everything, right? We're talking about the tokenization of house rights, of energy rights.
Very similar concept, exactly, yeah. So we digitize all of those assets, and in some cases we tokenize them. And if they're digital, it becomes for a utility to send me a hyper local price signal that says, hey, Jesse, if you charge your battery at this time today, we'll send you a few bucks. We'll send you a few euros. That capability doesn't really exist today. And to be clear, again, in some cases, utility, maybe they will offer you a scheme where they say, hey, Martin, I'm going to pay you to turn on or off your water heater at certain times of day, right? They may offer a program like that to you, but you choose whether or not you enroll in that program. And just to be really clear here, these concepts that I'm describing, so using all these assets to balance the grid, they've been around for like 20 years. These are not new concepts. The trick is they have never gone beyond pilots or proof of concepts. And that's our focus in Energy Web, is helping these utilities move way beyond where they've been for the past 20 years to make this stuff a standard way of doing business. And we're using Web3 tech to pull it off.
Let's go back to owning the EWT token. So what exactly do I do with it?
Stake it for first of all. So there's a staking pool running live right now. Token can be staked. And that the whole point here is that these staking pools are almost training our community to actually do what I'm describing with these worker nodes. So right now, you can take Energy Web tokens and you can basically do two things with them. You can build and construct applications.
Is there a minimum amount of tokens?
I actually, for the existing pool, there is a minimum, and I can't pull it offhand. Somebody in the chat should go for it. Oh, I'm hearing from my team right now. Right now, it looks like it's actually anybody can stake it. It's one token minimum, and there's a max of 300 tokens per decentralized identifier that you have to use, right? So that's the current staking pool. The other thing you can do with the tokens, right, just to be clear, and there are many organizations in our ecosystem. Oh, apologies, 3,000 tokens. My team's yelling at me on the other screen here. 3,000 tokens is the maximum you can stake per decentralized identifier. Sorry if I confused anybody out there. So you can stake those tokens now. You can also use them. We have an extensive GitHub repository where everything I'm describing with this use case and others is open source. And so people are out there building solutions right now and using Energy Web tokens to power them. What's coming, and this is really worth spending a moment on, is these worker nodes. And so what this is going to look like, I actually just was with the team in Berlin. So I was in your neck of the woods last week, Martin. And I sat down with the engineering team. We settled on exactly what's coming in terms of our technology roadmap for this year. And I got some previews of exactly what's coming. So what's coming for the retail side is that if you have Energy Web tokens, there's going to be something that looks really similar to an Apple store. and it'll be a web page where you can go to that web page and see all of these different use cases that I'm describing here. So these data exchange solutions or these other solutions, you'll be able to click on one of those, stake Energy Web tokens against those specific solutions, which have worker nodes behind them, and earn more rewards. So that's not live yet. We actually have to deploy our Energy WebX blockchain to do that, which we can talk about. But again, this year, Energy Web token holders will be able to take their tokens and stake them against these very specific solutions and earn awards for doing so.
Public service announcement. Yes, we had to stop staking in the US, so stop messaging me. I get a million questions. Yes, it's a legal thing. They made us do this. So
yeah.
And no, I'm not annoyed. I just have a hiccup. That's all.
I mean, I'm looking at some of the questions in here too. It seems like a couple people aren't necessarily convinced. They're like, what the heck is Jesse talking about? I should be really clear. This isn't like conjecture. Yeah, this is happening today. I was on a call yesterday with our colleagues in Australia. In Australia, there's a project, and I think there's a lot of documentation on this. It's called Project Edge. It's doing exactly what I just described. And it involves dozens of different energy companies, real batteries, real solar systems, real assets, using worker nodes to pull this off. Now that, let me just finish. So that is not connected to this public environment, right, where you and I can stake Energy Web tokens and be a part of the solution. That doesn't exist yet, right? That's what we're building right now. But the actual infrastructure, frankly, all of the complicated parts of that, which is getting enterprises to use it, setting up that infrastructure, making sure it creates value, it's there in multiple places around the world.
The energy markets are very local.
That's true. Yep.
So what I don't get is, if you live in a small country, if I stake 1,000 tokens in a country where I don't have the energy infrastructure, what do I do with them? What exactly happens to the stake token? I don't get the worker node thing.
Let me give a very, very specific example.
I could be. Yeah. Go ahead. No.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Be staking for another country.
That's the idea. That's what we want to pull off. That's the whole vision. Yeah. So I'll give a specific example. So we've actually renewable energy. Well, so as you said, energy market regulation is pretty local, but a grid in Austria looks pretty similar to the grid in California from a technology perspective. So we can use the same digital technology in Australia that we use in California. I'll give an even more precise example. We worked with Austrian Power Grid for many years. They're actually a member of Energy Web in Austria. I like to try and ground us. Yeah. So what we've been working with market participants in Europe and doing is standing up one of these data exchange solutions in Austria and other places in Europe. If that solution is there, it's going to use a bunch of worker nodes to route all these messages and perform this useful work for the energy companies. I'm sitting in California. I'm a US citizen in California. What we're setting up is I'd be able to take my Energy Web tokens, stake them against the Austrian or European data exchange solution, and have those nodes be performing useful work for you, even though I'm in the US. It doesn't matter. And in fact, the more people, the more organizations we can get in a decentralized setting running all of these nodes that are creating value for specific companies, that's what we want. If we have more nodes in more time zones on more infrastructure, it's a more robust and more secure infrastructure for these enterprises, instead of the way that they traditionally do business, which is write a check to IBM to do all of this in a centralized server somewhere. That's what we're trying to pull off.
So who are you talking to now? What is the state of Energy Web now?
So we have just over about 50 members. So these are some of the companies that actually run our infrastructure. These are some of the world's largest energy companies. Shell is one of them. In Europe, we have Elia, EDF, Engie. So there's a lot of different companies. Another company called Quinbrook recently became one of our members. There's some new members coming out. So these companies, we actually deliver these solutions for, but they're also running nodes on the Energy Web chain today. Most of our conversations is beyond that membership. We are relentlessly pitching electric utilities and other market participants to adopt these solutions. And the pitch for them, to be clear, we're not usually talking about
I'm
blockchain.
I'm somewhat convinced that this is going to be a hard sell. You're coming with a new technology, a whole new idea. How are they responding?
So that's where I was going right now. We don't sell, unlike, and I actually don't understand why they do this. Not to talk too much about other crypto projects, etc. We don't talk about crypto. We don't talk about blockchain. We don't talk about Web3. These companies face
You
real
hide it.
specific business problems. I started this whole session by saying electric utilities. This is a whole new way of thinking. So you put yourself in you're the CEO of an electric utility. You have millions of these assets being adopted on your network, and you have zero control over when those assets plug into the grid, do stuff on the grid, zero control. That's a completely new mindset for utilities. So we come in and say, hey, we have a digital solution that can solve that problem for you. And yeah, there's some new technology in here, right? We're using blockchain in a specific way. We're using these worker nodes, but we're also using a lot of traditional Web2 technologies, right? Where it's a packaged kind of solution. So our focus is on what problems can we solve for you. We're not coming in and saying, hey, the metaverse is going to change the world for you, electric utility. That's not our approach. If we did that, we'd get laughed out of the room completely.
You are doing what needs to be done. You need to hide the technology from people who don't understand it. So
And it's not
what is
even,
on
I
your
should say,
roadmap?
it's not even necessarily, before I talk roadmap, it's not even necessarily hiding it. There are, in many occasions, senior architects within these businesses that say, I like that you can solve this problem. Now tell me how you're using blockchain. Tell me how you're using worker nodes, right? We're not hiding anything, but we welcome that conversation because then we can really talk about how this technology is creating more benefits for them. But it's just, we don't lead with it because companies don't need a blockchain. They don't need Web3. They need solutions to the problems that they're facing. That's all.
Yeah. So what's ahead in the year ahead?
Yes.
We've had an exciting year already. We've got banks collapsing and Bitcoin up to 30,000. It's been a very exciting year so far. What is on your schedule for this year?
Primary theme this year is to connect the enterprise world, so these utilities we work with the crypto world. And the primary way to do that is to make it possible for people to stake energy web tokens against these worker nodes. So really from a technology perspective, that's our focus this year. So step one is we're actually going to use a new blockchain that will still be powered by energy web token, the existing energy web token, to pull that off. And that's called energy web X. And let me check before I say this so I don't get in trouble. Yeah, we're about to hit the go button imminently on launching an energy web X testnet that's connected to the Polkadot test network, which is called Rococo. So that's like the Polkadot test network.
That's fantastic. Now, today.
Well, I can't imminently. I don't know exactly when, but that's happening right now, and we're really excited for that. And that's the first step. Beyond that, we are still on track to launch the production version of that Energy WebX blockchain this year. And that's what's going to enable us to basically bring the crypto community and the enterprise community together. So that's the primary focus for us on the technology side. The only other thing I'd say is we are also building some new enterprise products. Everything I just described, my team has to work with these utilities to build this stuff, right? It takes some time. We're also going to be releasing some products this year so that any company can build their own solutions, so that any company can configure their own worker nodes, put them out to the public, and let other people run them. So our real theme this year on the enterprise side, productizing this stuff so that we're not the only company that has to do it. And then on the other side, making it possible for these worker nodes to support enterprise applications. And I should mention, Martin, we're doing a behind the scenes event. I think sometime in April, our team will be advertising it, where we'll be just having very specific milestones about when are these different releases going to be happening, et cetera, that map to these two things, which is, again, crypto, bridging crypto and enterprise, and then enterprise releases.
There's one question. How will node operators be compensated?
Yep. So this is the whole token economic model. And thanks for that question, Gonzalo. Supermarket coupons. No.
Okay,
I love it though.
ignore the other messages.
No, that's great. That's great. So the simple answer is energy web token. Energy web token. Yep. And that actually drives the whole token model here. When I say bring together crypto and enterprise, I actually mean creating a connection between enterprise adoption of our solutions and the energy web token. And just really specifically, here's how it works. If you're a company and you want to run some of these worker nodes, why would you run worker nodes if you weren't getting paid? I mean, you wouldn't, right? Because you have to go through the steps, taking your tokens and actually running one of these nodes. So companies will have to pay for those nodes to be run. That payment takes place in Energy Web tokens. Yep. So the awards happen in Energy Web tokens, and as more, it's kind of a flywheel effect. More solutions get adopted, more enterprises have to use Energy Web tokens to pay for these worker nodes, and that's this direct connection between enterprise and crypto.
How long do you see this process taking?
Can you say more, like what the release is, or how this is going to achieve critical adoption? What do you?
Critical adoption, awareness of this. Because, you know,
okay.
we are in the crypto space. We sometimes think that everybody knows about what we are doing. And the truth is that most people have no idea what's going on in blockchain or crypto.
Yeah, completely. So the boring answer is this year, everything we've talked about on this call will be doable. So users will be able to stake tokens against these worker nodes. And I should also mention, you're totally right. It's going to take some time to convince a lot of enterprises to use these kinds of solutions at scale. That's not necessarily a blockchain thing, though. These companies are not digital, and we're basically helping them digitize, and that takes time. But there's this thing called the Energy Web Community Fund, which some EWT holders are probably aware of. That community fund will be used to bootstrap these worker nodes. So like there's a pool right now that's issuing awards to people who have staked tokens, there will be additional pools that use the Energy Web Community Fund to help bootstrap these different worker node networks, because we know it's going to take some time for the enterprises to adopt this at scale.
I've seen Shell on your website. I've seen you talking about Shell. What are you doing with the biggest companies out there?
Yeah. So I spent quite a bit of time on this session talking about this grid problem, right, with these assets. The other problem we solve, which is very much what we've worked on with Shell, has to do more with supply chains. So if you look at like some of these new products that are coming to market in the renewable energy space, so things like sustainable aviation fuel. So this is fuel for planes that comes from plants instead of from fossil fuels. Hydrogen. In Europe, there's a huge discussion about hydrogen that's produced and made with green energy and not with natural gas. A lot of these supply chains for these products are really complicated, and there's no standards in terms of how to track those different things. So most of the work we've done with Shell is creating digital solutions on the Energy Web stack that use all these same technologies to enable more efficient tracking of these supply chains. And we use blockchain, worker nodes, tokenization in many cases, so second layer tokens to track all of these things. In particular, we've done quite a bit of work with Shell on that topic of sustainable aviation fuel. And the whole point there is to make it possible for businesses or people who are flying on planes to be able to purchase digital, again, tokenized, that represent green energy powering those planes instead of fuel coming from fossil fuels. So that's really the area where we've done a lot of stuff.
There are lots of projects about carbon credits. Do you do anything in that field?
I love that question. So carbon credits would be another one of these products in this area of a bunch of these new green energy products that are out there. To date, we haven't touched it. And the reason's pretty simple. That market is incredibly complicated and fraught with challenges before you even start talking about blockchains or technology. There's so many different stakeholders, invested interests, and greenwashing that we just haven't really dove into it head first. These other products that I'm talking about, green hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, we actually have a project on green Bitcoin. Those are real tangible products that we can trace and track. Man, there's a lot of challenges with the carbon space. And look, there are other Web3 projects experimenting with carbon credits. Without going into too much detail, I have a lot of questions for what they're doing, because a lot of those projects appear to be taking an existing database of carbon certificate projects and blockchaining them. And I just don't see where the value comes from in doing that. So again, we haven't dabbled.
Technology doesn't make it a better product. Yes.
Yeah. I imagine there is some value to be created with blockchain and Web3 tech for carbon credits. I just haven't seen it yet, nor have we really experimented with it heavily.
Jesse, thank you so much for giving us an update. We are out of time. It's 30 minutes. And my hiccups are still not gone. I'm gonna call it a day there. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you
Let's
feel
do this
better,
again.
Martin.
And if you are in my neck of the woods, let's meet up.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much, Jesse.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin.